All right, so is the NFL rigged? I love a good "is the NFL rigged" question. That's not true. I actually don't really love it. I usually get annoyed by these kind of things. Oh, my team lost. NFL must be rigged. I have to say, though, there is at least some more here than you typically get from a "is the NFL rigged" discussion. So let's talk about the Dolphins Eagles game and why some people are saying that it was rigged and, there's maybe the refs had some money on a specific side, that kind of stuff. So the first thing, what kind of gets fans frustrated in the first place was it was a poorly officiated game. There were a couple of missed calls here. I don't think there was as many as you'll see some screenshots on Twitter. A lot of these, people love to post holds that aren't actually holds given the way blocking concept works. No one really knows how blocking works except for, Mitchell Schwartz on Twitter. Just follow him, right? That's typically the main takeaway there. A lot of those, holds weren't actually holds, things like that. But there were some legitimately bad calls. And when you factor in that the Dolphins had 10 penalties to the Eagles 0, although there was some offsetting penalties in there. But the total was 10-0 in terms of what actually counted. That definitely raised some eyebrows. It did. Now, is that evidence of rigged football games? Of course not. Of course it's not. Enough football games go by, there's going to be some of that, right? That's just going to happen. So no, you're going to have, in theory, there's going to be games where one team commits 10 penalties and the other commits 0. There's going to be games where one team commits 10 penalties, the other team commits 3, and those 3 happen to be missed. Like, that's also going to happen, right? And I do have to mention that there were some bad calls that helped, specifically one bad call that did help the Miami Dolphins. There was a penalty where it was on a pretty big play. I believe it was a 3rd down and 1, if not a 4th down and 1, and they called offsetting offsides penalties when it shouldn't have been. It should have just been a penalty on Miami. It was the center's arm. They got it wrong. So again, all that stuff, there's no evidence from that alone to suggest any, funny business. Missed calls are going to happen. It's really hard to call an NFL game, right? People, I think, for some reason think it's easy. It's really not. Go out and try. It's very difficult. So with that, I think I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. Okay, Dolphins fans complaining about the calls, but, people have brought it to my attention. Hey, there's maybe a little bit more here than meets the eye. There's something here. Dwayne Heydt, I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce his name. It's spelled Heydt, so hate it, however you say it. We'll say hate it because I'm sure the Dolphins fans hated it when they were watching it. It's this been going around. People have said, just verbatim, his crew was suspended from the ACC championship game for unethical refereeing. That is what people have straight up said, but that is not exactly the truth here. And it's actually a little bit difficult to find because there isn't a ton of evidence for this, which you think there would be a lot of articles written about it. Whoa, a ref suspended from an ACC championship game for unethical refereeing? Wouldn't that be all over the news? It's because that's not exactly what happened. What really happened was, he is someone he went to South Carolina, and South Carolina and Clemson have a pretty big rivalry. So he then became an ACC referee, and a lot of Clemson fans did not like him. They felt like he had given some calls that had hurt the Clemson program one way or another, and that is a big reason why Clemson fans tend to root against him. They feel like he's had some calls that hurt them, and so they are upset and they don't like him as a referee. And so when it was announced that he was going to potentially be the ref, he was being considered for the ACC championship game back in 2017. A lot of people were upset. There was a change.org petition that has one of my favorite change.org pages I've ever seen. This is what it is. It says, this petition made change with 10 supporters. So 10 people signed up. That's all it took. Once the ACC saw 10 people sign a petition, they were like, okay, well, definitely cannot have him here. Obviously, I don't think the petition was the main thing here, but I do think this is actually what a lot of people are going with is, wow, this petition was suspend him due to unethical refereeing, and then he wasn't the referee for that game, so we succeeded. I think that's what a lot of people are going with. The reality is there has not been any evidence to support that he was even considered for being the referee of that game, let alone suspended due to unethical refereeing. And he has since, his crew has been they have refereed some very important games in the future, including the college football playoff national championship game just last year. So, again, there's something there. There is at least a team in college that really didn't like him. Like, that isn't nothing. But at the same time, if referees couldn't be referees because one, fan base really hated them, there'd be no referees left, right? Like, that's just how it works. Every team has some ref that they're convinced is out to get them. I'm not saying there's nothing to look into. I'm just saying this is not sufficient evidence that he is rigging the games one way or the other. People have brought up, well, he was born in Pennsylvania. Reportedly, he hasn't lived there in decades. And also, it was North Pennsylvania. He lived just as far from MetLife as he did from the Philadelphia Stadium. So what, is he not able to be a ref for any of the games in that area? And if we're being honest, you're not going to rig a game and risk all the money you're making to help out your own favorite football team, probably, right? If you are going to rig a game, you're probably going to do it for money. And given the way that game went, certainly, some of those calls were happening at a point when, like, they didn't need to help out the Eagles. The Eagles were doing fine on their own, making sure that they were going to cover, win that football game and all of that stuff. So that's just kind of how I view it, is like, people love a good conspiracy, and I get it, but you can't let you can't just ignore facts to let your conspiracy happen. And there's just things that are getting said that just blatantly aren't true right now. At the end of the day, I'm not saying that there's no chance that a rigging of an NFL game has ever happened, because, again, there's a lot of gambling is legalized now, so there's a ton of money changing hands, and for someone to pay off a ref to make a game go a certain way, I can see why that could happen. It has happened in the NBA before, so it's not out of the question, and it is something the NFL should be paying attention to. But just because a team got really a couple of bad calls, they got like 2 or 3 bad calls. That's, for me, how I saw it, go against them. Because of that, I mean, you can't look at that and say, well, clearly it was cheating. There just isn't the evidence there. Again, raise an eyebrow if you want, but that's all you can do. Anything more than that is just jumping to conclusions. That's what it is. So, those are my thoughts on all of this. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.